right. Welcome, everybody, to the February edition of Insight Sessions. I'm Jason Griffing, OneVision's Director of Product. Happy, as always, to have you with us. I am joined today by a fellow Jason, Jason Knott, Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist over at D-Tools. And we're looking forward to a great conversation here today, all about understanding where you sit as a company. Many of us as leaders, operators in our businesses, have a intuitive sense or kind of gut feel for where our company might stand. But of course, intuition is one thing, hard data is another. And D-Tools in general, and Jason, you in particular, have a really unique lens on the data question, given your position as one of the industry's leading software solutions. So I'm excited to dive in with you. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I am very excited to be here, and thank you very much for having me, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. As a reminder to everybody who is joining us live today, feel free to drop questions, comments, feedback into the chat. We'll do our best to address those in real time and or at the end of the webinar, and we appreciate you all taking some time out of your day to be here. So we're going to jump in straight away. Just wanted to touch very quickly on the agenda, some of the things you can expect to hear today. So, what current benchmarks are revealing about margins, sales cycles, performance gaps, how integrators are using data to pressure test assumptions about their businesses. We're going to touch a little bit on AI. It wouldn't be a webinar today if we didn't touch on AI, and you guys have some unique perspectives there, both internally with your operations and what you're doing in the product using AI, and then why benchmarking is becoming a real strategic advantage. Not just a reporting exercise, but something that companies can really use to get an edge and make sure that their business is performing at a really high level. So again, looking forward to the conversation and jumping in with you, Jason. And I thought a good place to start would be to just go high level and talk about benchmarking kind of as an overall concept and what you see. I know you're out there at events a lot. You've been in the industry for a really long time. And, what would you say surprises integrators when they first kind of jump into the benchmark data? Are there things that kind of catch them off guard or maybe unexpected when they start to really dive in and understand where they sit when it comes to like hard benchmarks instead of just gut feel?
Yeah, I think the backdrop is, and you hit on it, is I've been in this industry for a very long time, and it's void of data. For the most part, this industry has really been grasping at straws to try and figure out what information it can use to identify trends and where they should be heading. So it's one of the reasons that I joined D-Tools, quite frankly. For those of you who don't know, I spent years at CE Pro, 25 years as the editor there. Before that, I was 10 years on a security publication. So I've been in low voltage space on the editorial side for like 25, 35 years. I started when I was one. It's amazing how I've aged so rapidly. But
Man, you got started early.
I really did start
Yeah.
just so so youthful now. I'm sure everybody. Thank God this
Yes,
is just an
vibrant.
audio podcast. Yeah.
Very vibrant. Yeah.
Um. So, but yeah, there's a void. There's been this void of data, and the only way to do it was just surveys. When surveys is kind of like fishing. You put your line in the water, and you hope that that fish is swimming by right at the time when the bait drops right in front of their nose, and it's the same thing when you do surveys with an integrator. If you were to stop any integrator in the aisle at a trade show or anywhere and say, hey, what's your average project size? They don't know that off the top of their head, and they shouldn't, off the top of their head. That's not something that's going to be in their mind. It's not like when we were kids and I knew all my buddies' phone numbers. Well, now I don't know anybody's phone number. So that's why data is necessary and important. But to get to your question, D-Tools is the real data. So that was what excited me about coming over here. Was we're looking at actual proposals, actual contracts. So we're not displaying anybody's individual information. It's just aggregated information, but it's the actual real deal. It's the real data that's out there. So that's what's really cool, is it can give people the directional information that they need based on real data. Now, what surprises me the most, I think it really depends on the integrator. I think if you're a super efficient integrator who's been managing your business efficiently for years, you might be surprised to see what you see as potentially lower close rates, lower average contract sizes, massive amounts of change orders that are taking place. Those are some of the data points that we are grabbing. On the flip side, if you're somebody who's new to the industry, you might be surprised to see something like the gross margins being so high, in particular in this industry. But for me, I will say the biggest surprise that I saw when I first started looking at the data was, and Jason, you could probably talk to this too from your experience. I was surprised to see how many integrators break up projects into multiple proposals and multiple contracts.
Mm,
And so we see on a very consistent basis a single project that might have a proposal for by phase, pre-wire, installation, trim. We might see it by room location, home theater, backyard, primary suite, individual proposals, individual contracts. By system, an individual proposal and individual contract for the security, the lighting, the AV, so that surprised me. Or one for the builder and then one for the homeowner, so now you start talking about it, you can see why there's so many circumstances where this can come up. And I've talked to integrators after I saw that and said, is this something you do on a consistent basis? And they said that they're doing it more often because it is minimizing the sticker shock. So
yeah.
that was the big surprise that I saw.
Got it. Yeah, and that's I can imagine as a, data guy that probably presents some unique challenges in terms of trying to get at and understand what's going on in the data. But putting that aside, I to your point, as a former integrator, can definitely empathize, and I think what it points to, amongst other things, is that the sales cycle for integrators can be complicated. It's not a straightforward widget that you're selling off an assembly line, right? Every project is bespoke and has its own unique dynamics in terms of the owner's persona, the builders involved, the trade partners, and so forth. And so there's a lot of nuance, which I think segues actually perfectly into one of the first things we wanted to talk about, which is sales cycle data. So you guys have some pretty interesting data on how long sales cycles take, and obviously this is something that any business wants to pay attention to. Integration companies, no exception to that, of course. The faster you can get from that first conversation to a closed deal, generally speaking, the better. So tell us a little bit about what you've seen in terms of sales cycle data and what integrators out there should be thinking about as far as how quickly projects are closing and where they stand relative to their competition.
Yeah, so kind of breaking that sales cycle into two chunks. First, the one that you just touched on, which is from that client meeting and or walkthrough to the time that you are delivering the proposal to the customer. What we see in the data, and this is from 2025 data, is that integrators who are delivering the proposal to the customer within 14 days of that meeting or walkthrough will have an 88% close rate. So an amazingly high close rate if you can turn the proposal around. Now, obviously, the size of the project has a big variance upon how quickly you can turn a proposal around.
Hmm.
But if you can do it, if you wait over 60 days, which is going to happen when you have a very long, complex project for sure, it's going to require documentation and drawings and all those sorts of things. The close rate is still relatively high, around 69%, but again, much lower than it would be, almost 9 out of 10 if you're going to be able to get that to the customer within 2 weeks. Now, why is that a big deal? I would contend that if you're able to turn that proposal around, it says a lot about you as a company. It tells the customer right away that you are an efficiently run business and you're able to produce something so quickly. It also gives them a preview of what it's going to be like working with you. It gives them confidence. This drawn out period of time where there's no communication between you and the customer is not going to be good no matter how you add that up. Also, there's kind of a psychological element at play. When you meet with them, you run through you have that walkthrough. There's momentum. They are excited. They want to get this done, and that momentum can kind of dissipate if you're going to wait too long to get them the proposal. So, anecdotally, on the flip side of this, I have talked to integrators over the years. One's particularly in New York who told me this years ago, and I thought was interesting. They purposely do not deliver any proposal in less than 48 hours to the customer.
Oh, interesting.
Because, yeah, they believe if you turn a proposal around, no matter how small the project, if you turn it around in less than 2 days, that gives the customer the impression that this is some sort of a cookie cutter solution and it's not unique to them as a customer. So they actually finish them, they said right away, and they sit on them for 48 hours, which I thought was an interesting kind of.
There's some psychology there. There's like this Goldilocks zone, I guess, that you want to get into, where not too long. To your point, you got to strike while the iron's hot, and you don't want to lose that momentum. And every day that goes by is a day that the client can overthink it or go talk to one of your competitors and so forth. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. I could see how maybe turning it around too quickly makes it feel somehow less special or thoughtful in some sense. I'd love to, if you're good with it, I'm going to pull up and on the screen here a slide that you shared with me on these sales cycles. Um, I'll ask for people's forgiveness on a little bit of the formatting. I'm looking at this in Google Slides, and it was a PowerPoint, so you can see some stuff getting cut off there. But I thought this was definitely worth having up on the screen for just a minute, showing some average contract sizes with months from first contact to completion of installation. So tell me about this slide and what you see here that you think is interesting or that integrators should take away.
Yeah, so this kind of touches the second half of that sales cycle that I mentioned, that time of first contact to getting the proposal. But then you also have the time that the customer gets the proposal until they sign the contract. So you can see here, 35 days is the average time from they get the proposal. They sit on it for over a month. Now, what are they doing? That's when they're fielding proposals from your competitors.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just kind of put all that together of the time frame of it takes you to generate the proposal to the time frame that the customer is going to sit on it, and it shows you that there are gaps that take place in the sales cycle, and it's why it's very important to have a consistent pipeline that's filling these gaps, because on average you're going to be waiting, whatever, if you turn around, even if you turn around in 14, or a quick one, and they would sign it in 14 days and you get a 90% close rate, they're still going to wait potentially 35 days to sign that. It's
Mm-hmm.
not telling you that they're signing it that day. It's telling you that they're going to sign it 9 out of 10 times, but they
Yeah.
might still wait 35 days. So you've got to have a process. You've got to have, again, self-promoting D-Tools, why the software enables you to be able to generate proposals on a accurate and consistent basis. Because if you don't fill the pipeline, you're sitting with these time gaps waiting for the money to come in. So
Yeah.
again, I addressed this earlier. This kind of just shows you how long these project cycles can take. This is the not just the sales cycle. This is reflecting the installation cycle here with this big time gap. But
Got it.
there are,
Yeah.
most integrators are doing kind of that pyramid where they are doing smaller projects, but they're also doing the bigger projects. And bigger projects are important for a couple of reasons. One, that's where you really get to use the cutting edge equipment. The last thing you want to do is be running into customers where they know more about the technology than you do. And you're really going to be using and deploying the high end equipment at on these larger projects. And that's why doing larger projects is important. Smaller projects, of course, are important because they kind of, you can churn them out quickly and it generates cash flow. The other part on this, and I don't know if you're going to show this later, but there's a definite difference between the profit margin on smaller projects versus larger projects. And
Yeah.
so larger projects are a hassle. They're a pain in the butt. I know the customer can be rough, but they're going to make more money, and you're going to have a higher profit margin on those larger projects than you do on the smaller ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely do want to come back to margin, but before we do that, you mentioned close rates, and I think that'd be a great place to go next. So sales cycles can be protracted, as we just saw on that slide, and then when you factor in the installation progress as well, like those $250,000 to $500,000 jobs can be a year or two easily. So they're great. Every integrator wants them. They're great for the top line revenue and all sorts of things, but they're a battle in terms of that overall timeline and making sure that you have, I'd say, a reasonable balance of like mid-sized projects to keep cash flows coming in and things like that would be very healthy for the company. And particularly when you see those timelines, that really reinforces that. The other thing, of course, is that close rate that we just alluded to. So having a quick sales cycle and getting a customer to a decision is as quickly as possible is beneficial in a lot of obvious ways. But of course, you also need that decision to be a yes, right? We can get them to a quick decision, but if it's no, 90% of the time, that's not good. And so talk to me about close rates. What do you guys see in the data there? And again, what should integrators kind of be thinking about if they're trying to understand where their company currently sits in terms of a healthy close rate?
Yeah. So one caveat to know that the data that we talk about also includes commercial and residential. So this is not just pure residential data. So some of it can be skewed, especially if you're an integrator who's doing commercial, and especially if you're an integrator who's out there doing large commercial projects that are bid based. So, on a consistent basis, these large projects are going to be calling for 5 to 10 bids, and only one person is going to win that. Only one person is going to win that bid. So you're going to have a lower close rate if you're dealing at that level. So just know that can skew the data a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see kind of here in the data now. The one thing I want to point out here, and this is very interesting, and this is not unique to D-Tools because I've talked to the other software companies and the exact same thing, is that one of the things that we do not require is for an integrator to indicate that they won or lost the proposal in a software. And as you know, the more pieces of software you have where you have required fields, the more it just pisses people off.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, what that means is that there is a certain percentage of proposals that sit in D-Tools permanently open with no resolution. They're not shown as won. They're not shown as lost. So that skews this rate. So I know dealers might look at this and go, "Wow, my rate is way better than this." Well, you know what? It should be, because hopefully you're in there indicating whether you won or lost the proposal, and that gives you self-reporting. So this is an area where dealers need to self-report. Let me just throw this out. We did the research, and for the dealers who actually go ahead and completely fill out and indicate whether they won or lost the proposal, their actual close rate is 69%. So the actual close rate for the industry, I would contend, is 69%. This number that you're looking at here, 51%, really represents all those integrators out there who are still not completing the loop within the software, which you need to do. The other part I would recommend is when you're looking at close rates, is dealers need to do some self-analysis. So, what kind of proposals are in D-Tools, you can have proposals loaded with product images. You can have video. You can have schematics, from Visio and AutoCAD attached. You can have client references in there. You can have it fully itemized. You can have it room by room. You can have it by system. If you're doing your proposals, however you're doing them, if you're doing them differently, you should, as an integrator, look and see what you're having the highest success rate at, and then try and maybe there's a formula there internally for you. I talked to integrators recently who told me that they have started leading their proposals now with a security system because people desire home security, and a lot of there's a fear factor element there to having cameras around their home now, whether it's a Ring doorbell or something even more in depth than that.
Mm-hmm.
They have altered the order of their proposals, and they're leading with security. A lot of integrators for years, I know, led with the network because that's kind of the engine that drives everything else. But it's kind of boring to the customer a little bit, and then other Should you be leading with the elaborate home theater? So those are the sorts of things you need to experiment with as an integrator, and then determine what is coming up with your highest close rate. Is it by system? Is it by room? What technology? If it is by system, what technology is coming first? Do the clients want itemized proposals? Do they want blanket proposals with just a number at the bottom? You need to determine that and look, and that's going to affect your close rate.
Yeah. Yeah. And that point about self-reporting is so important and so difficult. Like I'm so empathetic to it. I mean, every business struggles with it. When you're a small to medium-sized company, you've only got so many resources to go around, and spending time keeping things like CRMs or proposal systems, practicing data hygiene inside of those systems, it can be a hard thing to do. But I would say don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Even if it hasn't been done in the past, start making a concerted effort to go into your system like DTools every so often and just clean things up, get old proposals out of there, mark them as lost, whatever you need to do to make sure that you have like at least a reasonably accurate data set to show you how your business is performing is one of the key things over time, especially if you're trying to grow, bring on new salespeople, build a kind of business development force. If you're an owner operator doing all your own sales, it's very easy to just kind of have a gut feel for how your close rate is. But as you start to bring in more people that want to help, to get help with that, I'll say, it becomes even more critical to have that in place.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, like just not to parrot back what you just said, but if you're an integrator and you look at you can indicate that you won or lost every proposal, and you've closed the loop in the software, and you look back and say, gee, every time I did a fully itemized proposal without images, we lost 9 out of 10 of those.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an indicator that, and again, I just threw that out. It could be completely not the
Any
case.
variation of that. Yeah.
Any variation. You look and see what is, and I would recommend look at the ones you've lost, not just the ones you won. Look at the ones you've lost, and there could be some sort of a theme or commonality there that you might want to change.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, well let's get to margin. I know that's the $1 million question. You can have all the revenue in the world, but if your margins aren't there, then your business is going to struggle. And I know this is something that is a frequent topic of conversation at industry events and so forth. And so tell us a little bit about what you guys see in the data as it relates to overall margins. What's healthy, what's not, where should integrators be striving to land when it comes to margin?
Yeah, so I just recently did a webinar with the National Systems Contractors Association, which is a primarily commercial group. But it was interesting, they have a target gross profit margin for their members at 40%. And it was actually very exciting to see in DTools that the gross profit margin for integrators in 2025, as 2025 data, new data, was 42%. So they're actually beating what was the recommended gross profit margin. Now, here we go with another caveat that I think many integrators don't know what their fully burdened labor costs are.
Mm.
And so think about all the direct costs for benefits, vacation time, insurance, the indirect costs like education, rent, vehicle costs. Those all need to be input for you to know what your true margin is on your labor. It's not just the wage that you're paying to your technicians. And then also, what is your labor utilization rate? Remember, you're paying somebody for 8 hours a day, but on average, you might only be billing 6.5 hours of that time. So you need to know what your labor utilization rate is in order to determine what your fully burdened labor costs are, and what you should, and again, setting your labor rates based upon that. So I think that a lot of integrators do not do that, and that could skew the labor rate margin higher than what it probably is in reality. But again, looking at it from the 30,000 foot view, the good news is integrators are hitting a 42% for again, it was 48%. This is 2024 data you're looking at.
Yeah.
We just did the 2025, the cumulative blended margin 42%. So, but you can see some of these high labor margins that
Yeah.
are in here. And again, I think that is due probably to some integrators not pulling in their fully burdened labor costs.
Got it. So again, it gets back to that idea of like data hygiene. And if you really
Yep.
want to understand how your business is performing at a very detailed level, you've got to find a way somehow to spend the time getting in there, keeping your data clean, making a habit out of it. So if it's a monthly process or something that you do on Friday mornings or whatever the case may be, having that process to go in there, keep the data clean and understand where you're at. It looks like from this data, again, you're saying this is 2024. You're got your finger on the pulse, so you can see how things are trending even more recently. But it seems like kind of in this 40% range, mid to upper 40s would be pretty healthy, is what I'm hearing from you as a kind of high level takeaway.
Yeah, and the one other thing to keep in mind is, we've done comparisons in the electrical space and HVAC and other spaces where they really heavily rely on labor. Mark, they're service businesses for the most part. They're not able. Thank God in this industry you're able to charge what you can charge for a very expensive projector or a giant display or a video wall or whatever it might be. And in many cases, an electrician doesn't have that opportunity to do that. So this industry is comparatively very much more equipment heavy than the other industries. So again, one thing to keep in mind when you look at that other chart is, and I don't know if we're going to talk about labor versus equipment blend, but on average, 76% of the income of the revenue from a project comes from the equipment, and
Got it.
only 24% is coming from the labor. So again, you're going to have a higher labor margin, but that's only based upon 1/4 of the revenue of the project.
Yeah, yeah.
The equipment margin is where you're really making more of the money.
Yeah, there's margin as a percentage and there's margin as dollars, right? So
Yes.
you can have a higher percentage of margin on a certain category, but if the overall dollars aren't there, it might not be moving the needle in your business. So that's an important distinction to understand. Yeah, so let's actually talk about that. You mentioned product versus margin. Let's go a little bit deeper. What are we seeing here? What's this data telling you? What should I be looking at if I'm an integrator?
This kind of goes back to our conversation before about, big jobs is where you can make hay. And the ability, because there are consumer grade products primarily or typically that are going to be something that you're deploying in a smaller project that they're shoppable, and they don't have the ability to be marked up as much as other products that you can carry higher margin on. Those you can see here, the real highlight is in that product margin column, that projects under $10,000 have a much lower ability to make money on the product margin, and
Mm,
thus you go to the far right column, you're going to make a lower profit on those. So again, it kind of goes back to why so many guys in the industry do target doing large projects that do take, sometimes 2 years to do. But yeah, you're going to make your profit margin in those larger projects.
got it. That makes sense. Let's shift gears to a related topic, which is progress payments. So you have the dollar amount of the job, you have your margin, all of that. But ultimately, in our world as integrators or former integrators, in my case, the money is coming in more often than not through some sort of progress payment schedule, right? So you have an initial deposit and then some staged payments along the way of the project. What do you guys see in terms of the data and how integrators across the D-Tools ecosystem are structuring those progress payments? And what interesting or insightful ideas might an integrator be able to take away from that?
Yeah, the takeaway is there's no one size fits all. What we see is it's all over the board in terms of, when an integrator has their progress payment set for the upfront payment, how much they're leaving for the final payment. And it's really out of that, I kind of gleaned some various recommendations of when some sample product payment progress payments, I'm sorry, that they could use as their structure. But there's no one size fits all, and you really as an integrator need to kind of know what fits you. There you go. You got it up on the screen. These are conclusions that I was able to draw out of looking at the various progress payment um, types that we see integrators using based upon the types of the project. So that 50% upfront, then a 40% payment later, and then a 10% end. When projects are kind of mid-size, multi-phase, and equipment heavy. Then we see a 4-phase. These are all based upon we're going to do the pre-wire, the installation, the trim, and the final. So that's more of a phase-based progress payment schedule, that 30-30-30-10 scenario. If it's a really, something that's going to require a high outlay of equipment, or money from you as the integrator, from a specialized one-off or very expensive projector or video wall or something like that, we see some integrators they request the client 100% of the equipment costs plus 50% of the labor right up front, which is interesting. And then the other one is you see the next suggestion there, 60-30-10, and then even an 80-20, which is really something maybe when you have a customer who has a past risk scenario where maybe they were slow to pay. One other thing I'll throw out here is talking with integrators who I've shared this with. A lot of them are switching to a 5% final payment versus a 10%. So that's and the reason being is because sometimes it's very difficult to get that final payment, especially if it's keypad engraving, all that sort of stuff like that you kind of hold back. But if I were to alter this and go back in, I would kind of add something in there that gives a 5% option. So I don't know what your experience was, Jason. Did you run into that?
That last progress payment is a beast to get. It is just such a difficult part of our industry. I talk about this all the time where if you're a painter or a plumber or an electrician, it's relatively easy to define when a job is complete, right? Like I can walk into the rooms, they are all the color that I expected them to be, and the paint is dry and all the touch up is done. And it's fairly straightforward. There's nuance there, I'm sure. But in our world as integrators, it's so difficult because it's well, the Hulu app isn't configured on the living room TV. Does that mean that the project isn't complete, right? Or there's all these, programming edge cases. There's just a million edge cases is really what it boils down to. So I think having a progress payment schedule that minimizes your exposure at the end of the project to a client who is continually changing their mind or, asking for a million programming customizations that are borderline out of scope and so forth, I think is a really good idea. Keith mentioned in the chat here, on larger projects, we should ideally be paid 95% before delivery of equipment. That's fantastic, right? The challenge is there's a balance here, right? Because the integrator wants to get paid upfront. Ideally, 100% would be fantastic. The client wants to be able to spread those payments out or maybe even hold some as potential, leverage, I guess, for lack of a better word, to make sure that the project gets completed to satisfaction. So there is that balance. And it doesn't surprise me to see that there are a lot of different variations of this that you guys are seeing in D-Tools. And to your point, there's no one size fits all. You did have another slide. Please go ahead.
Let me throw in one other thing. One thing, this is specifically just for D-Tools Cloud, which is our web-based application. We last year, early of 2025, we launched a payments integrated embedded payments solution. And it was interesting to talk to the integrators who are doing this, and something to think about is guys tell me they got so used to writing that merchant fee check to the credit card company, that just simply by asking for a wire transfer first before a credit card, and defaulting within the proposal the first default option as a wire transfer ACH payment, and greatly minimizing the amount of merchant fees that you would be paying if you're taking credit cards. So I'm not saying you should still take credit cards. Most every integrator does take credit cards versus checks. Um, and so chasing those checks down, physical checks, and running to the bank and all that sort of stuff. So something to think about that actually kind of speeds up and helps from a cash flow standpoint is thinking about asking for that wire
Yeah.
transfer
Yeah.
versus defaulting to a credit card.
That makes a lot of sense. This topic is clearly touching on something. There's a handful of comments coming into the chat here, so I want to just touch on those really quickly. Brian mentioned, could you use the term substantial completion instead of final? I'm a big fan of that term, provided that it's defined. It can't feel like ambiguous to the client. Like if it feels like a weasel word to them, then they're going to probably push back on it. But if you have a clear definition of what substantial completion means, then I think tying a progress payment to substantial completion and setting the expectation with the client early and often that there is going to be a kind of break-in period of the system, and having some structure in place. At OneVision, for example, what we recommend is we call it a complimentary premium period. So when the project completes, that kicks off a 30, 60, or 90-day period of time where the client is getting essentially a free trial of like a priority level support experience where you're going to be there, you're going to be right on top of it. And that allows you to kind of frame it up as, hey, when you first move in, there is going to be stuff that comes up. We're going to be here to take care of it. Here's how we handle that. And then after this, whatever 60, 90-day period, you'll have the option to upgrade to a premium plan or not. That's one way to handle it. But I think substantial completion, coming back to the original question, is a great thing to use. And it touches on another comment in there of just, important to update the definition of terms. So Rachel mentioned that, like, make sure you have terms defined in very specific language that helps the client understand what these progress payments are tied to. Any reactions or additional thoughts there?
No, and I know, from you and I having conversations that is an important handoff point that needs to take place from the installation team to the service team for the warranty of the equipment, whatever the installation warranty that the integrator is offering. So, yeah, that contractual language, I would defer to you guys at OneVision have
Yeah.
really had to focus, closely on that because of what the service that you offer.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And Keith dropped into the chat, I think, a good version of this, which is substantial completion is the point in time when all equipment has been delivered and installed, and all that remains is final programming, system tuning, and client training. So I think that's great. And there could be different variations of that. You could, plug that into AI or run it by your legal counsel and come up with different permutations of that. But I think that definitely captures the essence of it. So progress payments are a really big one. There was one other point I noticed on one of these slides that I'm going to pull up that I just wanted to touch on, which I would say relates to the conversation we've just been having about defining terms. And it's this second point here about clarifying internal roles. So, who in your organization is triggering the invoice at various stages of the project also feels really critical to me, right? So, it's fairly obvious for sales when the proposal gets signed, the salesperson has very natural incentives to go ahead and get that all triggered and everything moving there. But when you get into that more like project is completing, it's moving into service, you have to make sure that you have regular touch points with your project managers, that you're have a shared definition, I would say, of what is substantial completion or whatever you want to call it, and making sure that you have clear roles defined and processes in place to make sure that those triggers are happening on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and this comes back to operations. Do you have a playbook for your company? You talk to consultants like Jason saying or I am saying out there, and this is the sorts of things that he focuses on when he's dealing with customers. Like, okay, do you have the process in place? I always love the line of, gee, how big of a company do you have to be to have an employee of the month? And the answer is one. And it's the same thing with how big of a company do you have to be to have internal processes? One.
One.
If it's just even
Yeah.
if it's just you, that might be just as important as a sole op proprietor to have a process as a big company.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears and talk about change orders. So this is kind of a, maybe competing schools of thought here, right? You can look at change orders as sort of a necessary evil, something that just comes up in the project because the client's constantly changing their mind and it creates administrative overhead and it can be a real pain to manage. And in some cases that's true, and I think that can be a reasonable argument. There's also another school of thought that change orders are a profit lever and that ultimately there are opportunities to upsell along the way. And I think both of those things can be true, by the way. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Um, it depends on the context, but I'd love to hear your overall perspective on change orders and what you guys see in the data when it comes to how these are getting handled, how frequently, and so forth.
Yeah, you gave a good overview there, and it's interesting because this is whenever I talk about change orders to an integrator, I can see kind of the blood starting to boil, especially when I reveal that we do see integrators who are relying on a lot of change orders on their projects. And I say relying, you see them. I don't know if that there's no way for me to know that they lowball the original proposal. There's no way for me to really know that that took place. But the fact that there is such a heavy amount of change orders it could be a homeowner who's changing their mind all the time. It could be that the proposal was older and it took a long time to get signed, and there was product that was out of stock or equipment that had been discontinued. There are all sorts of reasons why change orders take place. We know that, but the ones that are really revenue based, like as in positive revenue based, I hear from integrators who have a goal of trying to minimize change orders and have none, that when they see a lot of change orders, they believe that that's an intentional situation where the integrator has gone in with a lower price point.
Hmm.
You know what? If that's their business model, that's their business model. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I know it's a real sticking point between integrators. But as you can see in this slide, 43% of change orders are create positive revenue for the integrator, and that's where in the midst of the project, you upsold or whatever the case may be. 8% where you know the change order occurred and you lost money, and that's who knows, you misspecified a product, or you did something that you had missed in the proposal, that you had to put in there, that was not the client's fault, and the client was not going to have to pay for that. And then 49% are neutral, which is again what I was just describing there, where all of a sudden you got to swap out a comparable piece of equipment because the one that you had it specified in the proposal is no longer available or is not available. You don't want to hold up the project. That's not the customer's fault. And in many cases, you're going to have a hard time getting them to pay for that, because you want to stay on track. So the other thing that I think is interesting is how often do you do the change orders? I have heard from some integrators who, like, I have the customer sign off and pay for every single one, no matter how small. It's $100 whatever cable, or a HDMI cable change. They pay for it. Others who tell me because it's bothersome to the customer, they will collect them. Either they wait till they have 10, a number of 10, and then they bundle those together and have the customer sign off on those, or they wait until it hits a certain price point, whether it's whatever, $500, $1,000, whatever the number is, that they wait until it hits that certain amount before they have the customer. Again, I don't have a right or wrong, but that's I think a best practice that an integrator needs to determine within his or her own organization on how they handle change orders on a frequency basis.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to think about when it comes to change orders, and I think ultimately, like any good integrator out there would agree that purposely lowballing a bid with the intention of hitting a client with a bunch of change orders later is not good, and I suspect none of our listeners do that. So then you get into the more like realistic kind of scenarios of, like, to me, the best use of change, or the kind of best, I guess, implementation, for lack of a better word, when it comes to change orders is they can be looked at as a tool. So a lot of times, like we talked about earlier, how when you're selling these systems, everything is so custom and bespoke, and the sales cycle can be really protracted because the client is making a million decisions. And ultimately, if you're communicating effectively with the client and saying, "Hey, this is a decision that we can defer on," and table it for later, just understand that we'll present it as a change order when that time comes, then they can be a great tool that way. And I think a lot of that really comes down to making sure that you're communicating the scope very clearly. I think the probably the number one thing that I think about here is that when I was an integrator, one of the things we found the most important and most effective to make sure to eliminate surprises, because I think that's the biggest thing you want to avoid is a client feeling caught off guard or like they were blindsided by something. And the biggest thing to make change orders a healthy part of your project relationship versus a toxic part is to make sure that the scope of what they're buying is very clearly communicated. So if you're giving the client a 30-page proposal that's just a list of part numbers and pricing, they're going to struggle to kind of make sense of that. And so having a plain English, non-technical narrative, almost description of what the system is that they're purchasing is such an effective tool. And it's been 10 years since I was an integrator, so we didn't have AI back when I was doing it. But now with like large language models, I mean, it would be trivially easy to take a proposal, insert it into AI. You guys may even be looking at this at D Tools, right? Of like using AI to essentially quickly create a plain English scope of work. However you go about doing that, I think that's one of the most effective ways to keep change orders from becoming a source of pain and frustration for everybody involved.
Yeah, that's very good point. And yes, we are. I know we're going to talk about AI, but yeah, we are using AI in the software and also within the company. One other thing I wanted to point out that I forgot to mention when we were talking about the labor profit, one of the things that I think is where we might see the most, I say gap isn't the right word, or errors, is the integrators, in many cases, not indicating or knowing indicating the difficulty level of the installation. So, for example, you're going to a house and it's got 35-foot high ceilings. You're doing all the speakers, you're doing the lighting, you're doing the sensors, and you didn't calculate that you're going to need to go out and rent a scissor lift to be able to get to the top of that ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Fortunately, within D-Tools, whenever you plug in a piece of equipment, that the software intelligently knows based upon hundreds of thousands of integrators doing proposals, how long it automatically will calculate the estimated labor time for you on how long that piece of equipment is going to take. But it won't calculate the difficulty level if you run into a scenario like I just described. So there is a difficulty rating element that you can go into the software and change that is an underutilized element where if you're looking for a way if I'm trying to identify areas where areas may not be maximizing the profit on the labor side, that would be one thing to make sure you consider every time you run into it. What's the difficulty level rating that you can give to this? And then it will automatically recalculate the labor time.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Well, we are starting to run up against our time. I do want to just touch on AI briefly, and because I am a big proponent of it personally, and I think that ultimately companies like D Tools have a fantastic opportunity to implement it in thoughtful ways that can help their dealers become more efficient. So give me just the kind of 2-minute version of how you guys are thinking about your product roadmap. And you don't have to limit it to AI, by the way. Like, what are you guys thinking about at D Tools as we looked at all of this benchmarking data and we're kind of bringing this conversation to a close? What features and concepts are you guys implementing inside of D Tools in the future or now even to help your integrators improve these benchmarks?
Yeah, so we as a company are all in on AI. I can tell you that from multiple different areas of the company within the software itself. Just what integrators might find most interesting. D-Tools Cloud, we actually showcased at CDA Expo and last week at Integrated Systems Europe. The AI agent will write the scope of work automatically for you. You do the proposal, and then you basically ask the AI, the software, to say what kind of a scope of work write-up do I want? Do I want detailed and consultative? Do I want concise and technical? Do I want client-centric storytelling? And it will write that for you. I mean, you see too many scopes of work that are loaded with all the model numbers of, some of the TV manufacturers. It's like spaghetti how long those model numbers are. Does the customer really need to know all that? He doesn't. So those are the sorts of things it does. The other kind of exciting thing, just today in DTools Cloud, we launched a natural language search functionality within the software. So you can go in and write, find TVs over 70 inches, find Cat6 cable under 10 feet. And instead of hunting through the filters or guessing part numbers, then it's automatically going to find those for you within the integrated product library that's got 2 million products in it. So that's what's happening, straight out in the software. Within the company, I can tell you that our dev team is using it, as I just mentioned, for obviously updating and development of the software. The support team, remember, we have 2 million products in the product library. We basically put all the specifications, the images, all those sorts of things that you're doing to draw upon for the proposal that users are using for the proposal. We are putting those into the library. So now we're able to use AI to do that versus, the time that it's still being done by humans, obviously, but the time is so much faster, and the ability for us to get all that product information in there is way, way faster. So,
Yeah.
And then the support team is using it. So we've already implemented this with particular client where we're actually for a specific integrator automating their workflow. So we're creating a project, we're creating the scope of work, we're creating a list of tasks, and we're applying labor suggestions using AI for that customer. And that's in SI, by the way, system integrator. So right now, the first introductions we've done are in cloud. We are also moving to have all this stuff in system integrator too. And then,
Beautiful.
we're using it internally for various functions on the sales
Yeah.
side and the marketing side to improve, how we go to market and how we communicate and how we talk with customers and how we talk with prospective customers. So I'm
That's
using
great.
it every day. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just a big believer that like the genie's out of the bottle with AI. It's not going back in. And so regardless of how you feel about it, you got to lean in and kind of embrace it, because the more people and the more good and thoughtful people and companies that get in and start using it in the right ways to build better businesses and better serve customers in authentic, meaningful ways, the better this is going to play out for everybody. So I love hearing all of that. You also proactively addressed a couple questions that came in the chat. So it sounds like you guys are rolling out AI on both the cloud and SI. Maybe cloud is getting some attention first, but this is all SI is getting looked at as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. One other thing I did want to touch on, and this is like hot off the presses as we're sitting here recording this on February 12th. There was a big announcement yesterday. You guys have a new CEO. Tell us about that.
Yes, G. Paul Hess, who is a person that I'm sure many in the industry know. I've known him myself since his installation days. We did profile some of his installs in Electronic House, which people may not remember was a companion publication to CE Pro for a while. And then he was at Elan for years, and I knew him there. And then he spent a long time at what was originally Snap AV, became Snap One, and then he was one of the executives that actually carried over to ADI. So G. Paul Hess is the new CEO of DTools. DTools has been around since 1998. It's only had 3 CEOs: Adam Stone, Randy Stearns, and now G. Paul Hess. Randy's not going anywhere. He's kind of be side by side with G. Paul for a while, but it's something he's been planning. People may not know Randy has got a very young daughter, so it's a great opportunity for him to spend some time with her. But yeah, it's very exciting. And G. Paul, we had a big company-wide meeting yesterday, and he was introducing himself to everybody, and it was really awesome.
Cool. Yeah, G Paul's a great guy, and you guys are in good hands. And hopefully Randy, I know, like you said, he's going to be around for a while. He's not disappearing, but hopefully this is a good thing for him as well. He gets to go spend some more time with family, or move on to the next venture. Randy's a great guy as well. So wish you guys all the best with that transition. As we're buttoning up here, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to plug a couple of things. So first and foremost, I'll pull up a slide here. And you guys have a user conference coming up, a D-Tools user conference. I believe this is the first ever. So this is an inaugural event. And I know you and I have been talking. You've been very much involved in getting this planned. So share a little bit about what this event is. And if anyone listening or watching wants to get involved, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So actually, some of us old timers remember a thing called D-Tools University that occurred from 2005 to 2007 in conjunction with the Electronic House Expo in Orlando. So it's been that long since D-Tools pulled together some sort of an in-person gathering of its users. And we just figured, it's about time. And especially because there's so much momentum and velocity taking place in change in terms of what's going on. So we are February 23rd through the 25th, as you show up there at the Renaissance Atlanta Midtown, doing the user conference. It's a 2-day event. Really, the 23rd is just an evening cocktail event. And then the 24th and 25th are the conference sessions. And we're going to be really, the way that each day is going to be divided out is the first parts of the day are going to be really oriented towards business, talking about AI, talking about service plans. Thank you to OneVision. Joey is going to be presenting there. We're really excited about that. Profit leaks that you can find in your business, where people are finding the best employees and how they're attracting them, which is going to be a really, really cool session of what is actually working to find technicians and salespeople. And then building processes. And then, of course, we're going to get into the afternoons are going to be delving into the product roadmaps. And the attendees will divide out between SI and cloud, and they'll be dealing with the product development teams, getting feedback, but also sharing what's coming down the pike. So it's very exciting, and we're looking forward to it. And if anybody's, it's kind of late if you're flying, I'm sure, but if you're within driving distance and you can still come to the conference and register, please do so.
Got it. And I'm assuming they can probably easily find that just by Googling it or going to the D-Tools web. Is there an easy URL? What's the best way if they're interested in learning more?
Yeah, it's a little buried on the website. I admit it's if you go to the dtools.com, which, by the way, it's now you don't have to do the hyphen in dtools.com.
Oh, good, good.
We got
made it
both
a little easier.
URL. Yeah. Somebody owned that one so we had to use the hyphen. So now you can go to dtools.com, and in the top nav, if you go under pricing, then it pulls down, and then there's a specific spot there that gets into the user conference.
We'll send out a link to that in the follow-up email as well for anyone who's interested. So also want to take an opportunity here to just quickly plug. We're super excited about this at OneVision. You guys have been amazing. We've really started to work much more closely as companies together. So we've introduced some integrations, by the way, which aren't listed on here, but for those of you on the call who are shared customers, so if you're a OneVision partner and a D-Tools user, this is important to know. We do now have an integration with D-Tools Cloud, where you can pull over proposal data into our software, Provision. Very nice, easy way to get those critical system details over into our service software so that your frontline support teams have access to all of the information they need to best support clients. So that's great. And there's more coming soon. Be on the lookout for that. More software integrations. In addition to that, we also have this promotional offer for new customers or new potential customers of OneVision. So if you are a D-Tools user and you're thinking about OneVision for your service and support for your clients, we are offering a $250 account credit if you sign up for an Accelerate package and you're a D-Tools user. In addition, enrollees who register at the D-Tools user conference will see that credit jump up to $500. Rachel's question about the integration with the SI platform. We are in active talks with D-Tools, so I will add that to our list to see, what is possible there, and we'll keep you posted on that. So definitely thank you for the question, and stay tuned. With that, we are at our time here. We're landing right on time at 1 o'clock Eastern. So Jason, just as we're wrapping up, if anybody did want to get a hold of you personally, follow-up questions, just connect, learn more about the conference or any of the work that you're doing over there at D-Tools, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can find me on all the social platforms. So if you want to look there, but you can email me directly, Jason K at d-tools.com. Or, give me a call, 413-883-4910. I'm happy to talk to anybody and kind of, if I can answer any questions. If I can't, that's the other beauty, I will say, with the AI platform now embedded across our software. I am very, very excited about the fact that I can go into the software and find and answer questions and help integrators. So I'm going to have full access to the AI capability on March 31st is what they're promising me, because now we've embedded it in with both SI, the data from the data side. I'll be pulling from the SI and from the cloud data. So don't ping me before March 31st if you're looking for a data or a question, but after that date, I'll be able to help you out.
Beautiful. All right. Well, Jason, thanks again for spending some time with us. This was super insightful. I had a great time. For everybody who attended live, thanks again for taking some time out of your day to be here. We really appreciate it. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up, and we'll see you all on the next one. Take care, everyone.